Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything Dungeons & Dragons, including advice for players and guides for Dungeon Masters.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Before we get into this week's topic, Kelly and I have a very special announcement. Our first book, Dungeons of Drakkenheim, has just launched on Kickstarter.
Dungeons of Drakkenheim is a campaign module for characters level 1 to 13 set in a ruined dark fantasy city. It's inspired by Season 1 of our live play campaign by the same name.
This episode of our show has been sponsored by the Dungeons of Drakkenheim project in association with our partners at Ghostfire Games.
This book is going to be jam-packed with content, including all of the original adventure sites shown in Season 1 of our campaign, as well as brand new magic items, spells, and the rules for the Eldritch Contamination.
Kelly and I have put everything that we love about tabletop role-playing games into this adventure. It is a non-linear, player-driven sandbox story where your player characters will decide the fate of Drakkenheim. Whether or not you've watched our live stream show, you and your gaming group will absolutely love exploring this city of dark fantasy and cosmic horror. The campaign is going to be live on Kickstarter through the rest of July 2021, so please head on to the links below to check out everything that's going to be in this amazing project.
You'll find a lot of extra goodies and add-ons to really bring your Drakkenheim campaign to life as well. So now let's get on to this week's episode.
This week, we are discussing Part 3 of our subclass tier rankings for Sorcerers in Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. This time, we are taking a look at the two brand new subclasses that have been introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer and the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer.
If you look on the screen right now, you're going to see the criteria that we use to rank the subclasses. We have pitted the subclasses against each other and not those of other classes. Also keep in mind that although we may hint at multi-classing, it is not a major component of our ranking system. And also we do not account for the role play that you use to bring your characters to life. Every sorcerer has an equal opportunity to be role-played fantastically, so we cannot use that as a judge of the subclasses.
Now, when we do look at the subclasses, though, we consider far more than just combat. We look at how these subclasses augment the base features of the class in both a combat scenario, but also in exploration, social interaction scenarios, problem solving, and all the different types of situations that Dungeons & Dragons characters get themselves into to evaluate how much that subclass is going to either change, alter, or expand what the base class is capable of. The more so it changes and builds on these things, the higher we tend to rank the classes.
There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling. So speaking of cosmic horror, let's start things off with the Aberrant Mind. This is definitely bringing chaos to the elements of what a sorcerer subclass can offer.
Yeah, it really feels like with the subclass that you're getting a taste of what it means to be a warlock or someone who has been shaped by the far realm or that kind of Lovecraftian influence. And this is reflected both in the really unique abilities that this class gets, as well as the expansions to its spell list.
And that's actually something that we should talk about for a second, is I think one major component is that both of the subclasses we're talking about today add something that all of the other sorcerer subclasses do not have access to, and that is an expanded spell list. And the implications of an expanded spell list for the sorcerer are extremely vast in what they offer for a sorcerer. In
the case of the Aberrant Mind, you gain the psionic spells feature right away at first level. So this kind of draws on that cosmic horror and psychic powers sort of influence here. Psionic spells works very similar to the cleric's domain spells in that it is adding spells to your spell list that are known for your sorcerer, and you always have them available to you. So the sorcerer over the course of 20 levels learns 15 spells, but thanks to this feature, at first, third, fifth, seventh, and ninth level, you gain 2 extra first, second, third, fourth, and fifth level spells known, respectively. Now, these spells are chosen for you from the list, and it's a pretty great list. But one of the things that we also need to bear in mind is that whenever you gain a level in this class, you can actually swap out one of the spells that is granted to you from this feature for another spell on the enchantment or divination spell list of the warlock, sorcerer, or wizard.
So what that actually means is that even if you see the spell list presented to these two sorcerer subclasses and you're not a big fan of the spells offered, Good news, you can swap them out for your favorite spell choices, which really means that the Sorcerer is getting, by around 10th level, they have almost double the amount of spells that they would normally have.
It is basically precisely double, because the Sorcerer at 10th level has 11 spells known, and this is going to add 10 more spells known to your arsenal. So that's for 21 spells known total, which incidentally actually means that a Sorcerer of 10th level has more spells available to them that they cast through their spell slots than a wizard would. A wizard prepares a number of spells equal to their level plus their int mod. So a 10th level wizard with an int of 20 prepares 15 spells. Now the wizard will also have rituals, but this does really close that gap.
Yeah, one of the big detriments of the Sorcerer before this was that their spellcasting seemed limited compared to some of the other prominent spellcasters. But by adding in the expanded spell list, we've opened that wide up, and now they are much more likely to stand toe-to-toe with the other spellcasting options.
And if we look at this spell list, there's a lot of hits on here, and very subtly, not only are you getting 10 more spells known, you're actually getting Mind Sliver as an extra cantrip too. So you're getting a bonus. It's not really explicitly stated in the text, but you're getting a bonus cantrip in addition to more spells known, which is pretty awesome. There's amazing spells on here like Arms of Hadar, Dissonant Whispers, Hunger of Hadar.
Even Ivard's Black Tentacles or Telekinesis are amazing pickups as well. So this is a pretty decent spell list that you may not even feel the need to swap many of these out. There's a few that at higher levels I could see maybe dropping Arms of Hadar, but
I will note that Hex is an enchantment spell. So if you don't want Arms of Hadar or Dissonant Whispers, you could swap that out for Hex, and you could take a feat like Spell Sniper, and you've got Eldritch Blast now on your Sorcerer without having to multiclass to Warlock.
And if there's other spells on this list that you don't like, you could always swap them out for things like Hypnotic Pattern or Dominate Person.
You get a really great option, and then you can use your regular Sorcerer spells known to pick up staples like Counterspell, Fireball, Synaptic Static actually is one that you could also pick up here as well.
Also at first level, you're going to gain telepathic speech. You can choose a creature within 30 feet of you, and as a bonus action, you can link yourselves telepathically to each other and gain a telepathic communication for a number of minutes equal to your charisma modifier. Now, very important note about this telepathic communication is it is two ways, and this is actually important. Some telepathic abilities only suggest one-way communication, but two ways means that if you do have to split the party, you have open communication at a distance. And although you can only have one communication link open at a time, there's no limit to the amount of times that you can use this ability.
At level 6, you gain the Psionic Sorcery class feature, which is an augmentation for your Psionic Spells feature. This allows you to spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to cast any of the spells granted by your Psionic Spells feature without using a spell slot. So rather than using a third level spell slot to cast Hunger of Hadar, you can spend 3 sorcery points instead. When you do this, that spell no longer requires any verbal or somatic components, and it doesn't require material components either, unless those material components were consumed by the spell. So generally, if the spell has a costly component, or the component is consumed, you still need that. But this is kind of giving you subtle spells, but for your other spells. And notably, if you are retraining into getting spells like Suggestion or Dominate Person, this is pretty useful, although casting the spells with sorcery points for this just to get the subtle spell effect is not a good trade, because subtle spell on its own is only 1 sorcery point regardless of the spell's level. So this ability is kind of like getting a 2-for-1 deal on being able to create spell slots, because all sorcerers can convert sorcery points into spell slots, but you're kind of getting a discount on this, and you're getting the subtle spell effect on top of it. I think it's cool as a perk. I don't know if I would use this all the time. I think actually I'm very likely to still take Subtle Spell.
This feels like the last-ditch effort. If you're low on spell slots, but you still have sorcery points available, you can still be casting spells using your sorcery points. But besides that, I feel like I would still pack Subtle Spell and I would still rely on that one sorcery point subtle spell with my whole spell list open to me, rather than just those specific spells. But it's a neat ability. I don't think it's a must-have or the greatest ability.
Yeah, also at level 6, you do gain psychic defenses as well, which means that you're going to get resistance to all forms of psychic damage, as well as advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened. So watch out, Mind Flayers.
At 14th level, you gain Revelation of Flesh. You can now change your body in interesting ways for up to 10 minutes to give you some benefits. You spend a number of sorcery points that you want to use depending on how many of these changes you would like to occur. It is a bonus action to activate this, but some of the options here are pretty outstanding. You could see invisibility, you could fly, you could gain a swimming speed and the ability to breathe underwater, or you could change into an amorphous form that lets you squeeze through areas no larger than an inch wide.
I think the standout thing here is spending 1 sorcery point as a bonus action to get a flying speed for 10 minutes.
That you don't have to concentrate on. Pretty good. But I could also see stacking up a bunch of these. If you're in a watery campaign, having that swim speed and underwater breathing is going to be key. This almost feels like, yeah, the flying is going to be your go-to, but this is a really nice Swiss Army knife ability that really is adaptable for a very low cost.
Yeah, I mean, now a lot of other sorcerer subclasses like the Dragon Sorcerer and the Divine Soul at 14th level do get flat-out wings that don't require concentration to fly either, and don't cost them a sorcery point, but they don't quite have the flexibility that you do. So I would say that's a pretty even trade.
I agree. I think that the flexibility is actually, in my opinion, better than just straight up wings, because you still have the option to fly, but there are many moments that flying isn't the answer, and one of these other options might be. At 18th level, you gain Warping Implosion. This is kind of a ridiculous Nova version of Thunderstep. The way that it works is, as an action on your turn, you can teleport up to 120 feet. And when you do so, the area that you left, every creature within 30 feet of it needs to make a strength saving throw, or else they get pulled into the center and take a bunch of damage.
What's cool about this ability is that it's not a spell, so it interacts with a lot of other sorcerer powers in interesting ways. Your sorcerer could run up to a bunch of enemies, use this power to clump them together and get to safety, and then use Quicken Spell to cast a spell as a bonus action, perhaps dropping a Wall of Fire on them, or casting Hunger of Hadar on them, or Hypnotic Pattern, or some sort of brutal AoE that's going to incapacitate or otherwise knock them all out. It can be used once for free, and then afterwards you can spend 5 sorcery points to do it again, which is pretty expensive, but it does let you do some interesting shenanigans. It just feels like an ability that you could have got at a much earlier level, and it would have been amazing, but coming online at 18th level feels a little late.
Here's what I do like about it. Is it the most powerful 18th level ability? No. But is it thematic and something that I will use a lot? Yes. Now, when I say a lot, I will put in there that having once for free and then having to take a rest is not that bad. If I really needed to use it a second time because the opportunity presents itself in perfect harmony with the conjunction of spells I want to use, and I have 5 extra sorcery points, maybe. But I think the way to look at this is that you are getting use of it for free. And if you need to, you can blow 5 sorcery points. Again, it's not the most powerful 18th level ability, but I really like it here, and I would use it a lot and have so much fun using it.
I think the real key to get the most out of it is to use it to collect a bunch of enemies so that you can use Quicken Spell to put them all in the area of a single really big spell.
If you're playing with a party that has a wizard in it who has access to these spells, the 1-2 punch of you sucking them all in and then the wizard dropping a force cage on them is great.
Yeah, and overall, I gotta say, when we're looking at this class, is there any way to not give this an S?
I mean, first of all, the abilities are really fun. Even the ones that we said weren't our favorites are still really great. Maybe we could argue that if we just look at the abilities, this is an A subclass, but the fact that it gets that expanded spell list, and I have mild issues, but I'm also really happy to see the expanded spell list. But it really kind of breaks the sorcerer out of its cage and says, this is the sorcerer unleashed, and it's got to be S tier.
Yeah, I think so. Just, if this subclass gave you little else other than that, I think it would be S tier. Just because it solves such a huge issue that so many people have with the base sorcerer in how limited it is. And the icing on the cake is that you can swap the spells around from this feature, even within the divination and enchantment school. Those are some of my favorite schools of magic. There's really powerful spells in there, spells that are both on the sorcerer spell list, but ones that are not. And being able to kind of move those things around as you need to decide, okay, I really want to cherry pick these ones, and then freeing you up to decide what you want to do with the rest of the sorcerer spell list is just amazing. It's a very different problem compared to the Divine Soul. Because with the Divine Soul, you're still getting 15 spells known, and now you're choosing 15 spells from the entire Cleric and Sorcerer spell list, which is a huge problem. But this feature is saying to you, hey, have 10 more spells known. I picked these 10 spells for you, but you get a little bit of leeway to switch things around, and guess what? You can even go pilfer some of your favorites from the Wizard and the Warlock.
So here's the really important question. Before we get into the Clockwork Soul, I want to ask this question. If the subclass had no abilities, but just said, choose double the amount of spells for your sorcerer, and you can pick them from these schools of magic, but also from the Wizard or Warlock spell lists, would that be an S tier subclass?
I think it would be. To be honest, I do. And if we strip away that feature and look at just the granted features of the class alone, we assume that things get reworded slightly, I think it would still be a solid B. It would still need something else, like when you look at the other features of the other sorcerer subclasses. But like, I've seen the argument that the baseline features outside of the spells of the Aberrant Mind are not great, and I do disagree. I think that they hold up. They compare very favorably to the high level features of other sorcerer subclasses, and so it really feels like this is a subclass where you get to have your cake and eat it too.
I would have given it an A without the spell list, but I'm also like, I might be biased because I love this theme so much, and plus I am looking at it with the spell list, so I would give it a low A without the spell list, a easy S with the spell list. Yep. And as we move into the Clockwork Soul, all of those things that we just talked about with the spell list remain true. We're just kind of flipping the coin from the elements of chaos to the elements of order.
I love the theme here. We've got order and chaos. And for me, I'm someone that loves the theory that order and chaos are more alike than they seem. That at a certain point, order becomes so ordered that it is chaos. That especially when you look at like Mechanus, which is the plane of order in the cosmology of D&D, it is this gigantic, unfathomable machine. And it tells you that at a certain point, the machine becomes so ordered that the human mind only sees chaos. And certainly there is an order to chaos as well. So I kind of love this idea that like it's like the Mobius strip of order and chaos is really being one and the same. And I love to play that up. When I played my Clockwork Soul, though, I also love the theme of whenever I cast my spells, there was like that tick-tock of the ticking clock. It was a really fun subclass to play. Just as with the Aberrant Mind, the Clockwork Soul gains Clockwork Magic, which is working in the exact same way in that you're getting extra spells every level that are spells known. Now, the baseline spell list here is pretty good. It has 2 standout hits on it in the form of Aid, Wall of Force, and also Greater Restoration. But I have to say the rest of the spell list is kind of take it or leave it.
But what about the schools? The schools that you get?
The thing is that the Clockwork Soul lets you swap out spells for Abjuration and Transmutation spells from the Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard spell list. So this means that you can swap out for such staples as Counterspell, Polymorph, Dispel Magic, which is already there. You can get Shield, you can get Absorb Elements. You can really just... because the Abjuration and Transmutation spells are such a big part of just spells that you would want to take as a sorcerer anyways, this feature just basically feels like, hey, guess what? Double the number of spells known as a sorcerer.
I do want to point out 2 things. Number one, even if the spell list doesn't seem as interesting as the Aberrant Mind, that ability to swap your spells has to be taken into account, meaning that this is still an incredible feature. Yeah. I think adding Aid to a sorcerer spell list is really awesome, especially when you think of your sorcerer metamagic and your extended spell metamagic, which you used to basically use Aid before a long rest.
Yeah, so the idea here is that you use Extend Spell with Aid to double the duration of Aid, so it goes from 8 hours to 16 hours, which means that you can cast it using a high-level spell slot before you take a rest, and then you take the rest, aid is still in effect, and so you get the extra hit points from aid, and there you go.
You get your sorcery points back, your spell slot back, and you've just given temporary hit points. Use your biggest spell slot to do that. It's really key when you think of the way that these new spell options interplay with your meta magics.
Yeah. The other feature that you get at first level as a Clockwork Soul is called Restore Balance. This allows you to, a number of times per day equal to your proficiency modifier, cancel advantage or disadvantage on a die roll that you or another creature that you can see within range makes. This is a really cool and subtle ability because you can get a lot of mileage out of canceling someone else's advantage. The most notable example is being, there's a lot of monsters in D&D 5e that have magic resistance, which means that they get advantage on saving throws against your spells. You can just be like, not today, devil. You just cancel out that magic resistance. Well, this doesn't let you get past legendary resistance in any way, shape, or form. It really can help your spells land. And on the inverse, if you're subjected to disadvantage on one of your own saving throws or one of your party members is subjected to disadvantage on one of their own attack rolls, just cancel that out and negate it.
You get to use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, which I think is also pretty key because that means it's going to scale with you. And for a first level ability, this is wild. At 6th level, you gain Bastion of Law. This ability allows you to use an action to create a ward around you or another creature that you can see within 30 feet. You can spend between 1 and 5 sorcery points, and the ward is represented by a number of d8s equal to the amount of sorcery points you spent. When that creature, either you or the one you chose, is attacked and is about to receive damage, the ward can jump in place and you can throw those d8s down and block that amount of damage.
At level 14, you gain the ability Trance of Order. This power is activated as a bonus action, and you can use it once per long rest, but you can spend 5 sorcery points to activate it again. While you are in a Trance of Order, which lasts for 1 minute, attack rolls against you cannot be made with advantage. So if they have advantage, canceled out. But in addition to this, whenever you make an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, if you roll that d20 and the result is 9 or less, you just bump that up to as if you'd rolled a 10. Which is pretty similar to the Rogue's Reliable Talent feature as an ability that you can just activate or turn on. This means that you will basically never fail concentration checks while it's in effect because sorcerers are proficient in constitution saving throws. So your concentration is guaranteed while you're in a Trance of Order. You can reliably make attack rolls hit. You will be able to always make your good skill checks. Like if you're a sorcerer with a high charisma score and proficient in persuasion or deception, you're probably pretty reliably going to be getting 20s on your, at least a 20 on your deception or persuasion checks. And even for skills that you're not super proficient in, you can roll the dice and you're still not going to fail badly.
At 18th level, you're going to gain Clockwork Cavalcade. You get to, as an action, summon a little Modron spirit that can help you out by disappearing and causing one of a few different effects. Either granting 100 hit points that you can divvy up amongst creatures in the area as you see fit, repairing all objects within that area, or ending all spells of 6th level or lower on all creatures and objects within the area.
Once again, you can use this ability once per day, but you can spend 5 sorcery points to use it again if you need to.
So, looking at the Clockwork Soul,
it's an S tier.
Yeah, we're in the same boat as the Aberrant Mind, where even if we were to strip away the spell casting, I think this is a really strong subclass. I actually think out of the two of them, this one might be a little stronger.
Trance of Order and Restore Balance are pretty nuts. The only feature here that I would say is a dud, and it's not really a dud so much as you're just probably never going to use it, is Bastion of Law. Because those 5 sorcery points, like spending 1 to 5 sorcery points to reduce damage by a couple d8s, it's hard to use because, okay, yeah, you'll put it on the tank or someone vulnerable or yourself, but like I feel like for the cost of 1 to 5 sorcery points, I can prevent more than 1d8 to 5d8 damage. Like, reducing damage by 1d8 for 1 sorcery point, I think is a pretty bad trade. And even if you spend 5 sorcery points for 5d8, which is an average of roughly in the ballpark of like 18 to 20 damage, that's not a lot of damage prevented for the number of sorcery points that you're spending to get that damage reduction.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's really an ability that's worth using. All the other ones are totally worth it. Like, I would spend that 5 sorcery points to activate the Trance of Order again, and you're probably going to prevent way more damage by doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do think that what the Clockwork Soul does that I'm really into here is, one of the other classes, the Wizard, one of our favorites is the Divination Wizard. And the Clockwork Soul kind of brings the elements that I love about the Divination Wizard into the Sorcerer, which is the control of the actual fate of Dungeons and Dragons, which is in the dice rolls. And this has several abilities that let you nullify advantage or disadvantage, boost up your scores to a 10 minimum, and again, make it so that nobody can have advantage on you. And these small elements actually get you to control the dice, which is such a big thing in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep. Yeah, and it's weird how it interacts with advantage and disadvantage in such a unique way. It makes the mechanic quite unique. Is it necessarily as powerful as Portent? I don't know. I think in the right circumstances, it certainly can be. And it's going to feel like it's having a similar level of impact. Especially within the context of this is what the options are available to a sorcerer, right? Because now you really get a lot of the options. And I think it's worth mentioning as well that now sorcerers also have the feat in Tasha's that gives them 2 extra sorcery points and 2 extra meta magics known. It's really, I think the biggest thing that was holding back the sorcerer, if you will, was the limited number of meta magics known and the limited number of spells known. And both of these subclasses plus the feat from Tasha's really just unshackle that entirely.
Yeah. Now, I do want to say that before we go into the community rankings, we're giving both of these an S, but there is something really important that I want to talk about, and that is the effect this has on the other sorcerer subclasses.
I agree. Like, I think it's an open question if the Divine Soul is still worth an S tier.
It runs into those same complications we get from so many of the sorcerer subclasses, and I actually think one of the big mistakes here was in Tasha's they made 2 of my favorite sorcerer subclasses. Not only that, but I think this has boosted sorcerer to maybe be my favorite spellcaster. But the ones from previous books seem like duds now. They need that spell list.
You know what's really unfortunate about this too? Tasha's Cauldron of Everything dedicated 2 pages to Battlemaster builds, which are just a tantamount to information that you could have gotten from watching one of our videos. They could have dedicated those same number of pages to going back to all the previous sorcerer subclasses and giving them an expanded spell list.
Yeah, I think it was a missed opportunity.
It was because they went back and they revised the Beastmaster in Tasha's, so that would have been a very small thing to go back and do. And I think as a community, we could very easily brainstorm an awesome spell list for the Storm Sorcerer. The Dragon, I think the Dragon should actually have 1 for each color. For each Dragon
that would
color.
Be fun.
I think the Wild Magic Sorcerer could have we could make a cool table that randomly generated the Wild Magic one's spells. And I think with the Divine Soul, I think if Divine Soul should just choose a Cleric domain and get the domain spells from that Cleric domain added to theirs, and then they can retrain them for other Cleric spells.
The Shadow Sorcerer needs all of that necrotic and shadow magic. I think that the Storm Sorcerer would actually benefit massively. It was one of our least favorite sorcerers because it didn't deliver on the theme that it advertised. But I think by giving an expanded spell list that had things like Call Lightning or
Sleet Storm or Ice Storm, like, yes, it would actually really boost that subclass up considerably. And so I think that in light of this, it's really unfortunate. There's a part of me that really feels that all other sorcerer subclasses have bumped down a tier because of the presence of these 2. I think the Divine Soul still holds up. I think that there's still a rationale for keeping the Divine Soul as like borderline S tier. But I think you really notice the limitations of the Divine Soul when it is compared to these 2 subclasses now. It's a huge amount of power creep, too. Yeah. Now, in the case of the Sorcerer, I feel that it's necessary, and maybe if we were to do these expanded spell lists for all the other previous Sorcerer subclasses, we might want to really seriously reconsider what the impact could be across the game as a whole. But I would be willing to try a couple one-shots with just no other rebalance changes, just give the other sorcerers an expanded spell list and see how that feels. I think if you put that into practice in play, it would probably be fine.
Yeah. Now, for the sake of this video, I say that we just leave the sorcerers where we rank them, but it is important for us all to know that these have really raised the bar on what the S tier of sorcerers feels like. So up on the screen right now, you're going to see our final rankings for all of the Sorcerer subclasses. But let's take a look at what the community had to say.
There are absolutely no surprises here. When we look at the Aberrant Mind, 40.7% of respondents gave it an S tier ranking, and 34.4% gave it an A tier ranking, with 19.3% giving it the B tier ranking. Sliver for C, and like nothing for D tier rankings. And that was out of 6,000 respondents.
When we look at the Clockwork Soul, we're basically almost looking at the exact same layout. There's only a minor percentage difference, with 42.2% giving it an S tier, 33.6% with A, and 19.3% with B, and again, very minimal for C or D.
Incidentally, we also asked in our survey this time around how many people had actually played each of these subclasses, and about 13% of respondents said they'd played a Aberrant Mind, and about 9% said that they'd played a Clockwork Soul. And I actually think there's more people like you out there, Kelly. I think the Aberrant Mind wins out on flavor.
Yeah, I do think that if you look at the Clockwork Soul a little closer, there is a really beautiful flavor there. But a lot of us D&D players love our chaos, and if we're bringing in the elements of horror, cosmic horror, or dark fantasy, the Aberrant Mind really speaks to that.
Yeah.
I love both of these, and actually you've warmed me up to the Clockwork Soul, but I think a lot of people needed to be warmed up to it.
I mean, I just felt playing a Clockwork Soul in one of our Untold Tales of Drakenheim. Now, I also had the Dunamancy spells added to this as well from the Critical Role stuff, and that character, that 10th level Clockwork Soul felt measurably more powerful than any of the wizards that I played at 10th level. Like, at that specific level of play, which I think for both of these subclasses, level 10, 11 is like the apex of their power when you're feeling like, I have all these spells, I have all this meta magic. Definitely feels pretty amazing. But the effect of that actually continues over into high levels, because one of the things that happens to sorcerers as they advance in levels is that you get 11 spells known by 10th level, but then from 10th level to 20th, you only learn 4 more spells. Now, you can retrain things out, but that basically means that you only get to have 1 spell of all the high-level spells, which your 9th level spell is going to be Wish. And then you go back down and you're like, oh, this is really limited to what I can have for my high-level spells. But as you advance into high levels with the Aberrant Mind and Clockwork Soul, that's not a problem, because you just retrain and you've got this great baseline of 1st to 5th level spells, and then you can bring in those higher level spells and have that added flexibility. It pays dividends.
Yeah, and absolutely, you having played one in a game where I was the Dungeon Master, I can say very honestly that as a Dungeon Master who hadn't ran a game for any of the Tasha's subclasses, I don't think I was adequately prepared for how easily you could undo every combat encounter. And it was just the combination of spells, sorcery points, and abilities from the Clockwork Soul that I tried to throw scary things at you, and you just, first of all, the whole party had a massive amount of aid hit points.
Yeah.
And you were able to make sure, using everything, that you landed all the spells you needed to land and just destroyed combat encounters. It was crazy.
Now, Joe did play an Aberrant Mind as well in one of our Untold Tales, and I found that in that one, that being able to just set up the telepathic link as needed was really, really useful, right? Just getting that in play each time meant that the communication and planning, particularly for that adventure, which was a bit of a heist, it was like you guys had walkie-talkies on demand.
Yeah. I love both of these subclasses, and so they're both phenomenal. Us and the community all give it an S tier. If you're wondering what sorcerer you want to try out, these two are phenomenal.
I would say if you are someone who has been interested in the sorcerer but felt that the mechanical limitations of the baseline sorcerer were turning you off from the class overall, give these ones a second look.
So up on screen right now, you will see our final rankings for all the subclasses, and next to that, you will see the community's rankings for all the subclasses. Sorcerers have proven to be an excellent spellcaster, especially with these new additions, and I do think that it is unfortunate what this implies for the rest of the sorcerer subclasses, but overall, it is a needed nudge in the right direction for sorcerers, and I hope that in future books, we see additions to the previous subclasses to help bring them up to the same tier and level. So this has been a look at Sorcerer Subclasses Tier Rankings Part 3 in Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. Tell us about your experiences with these two subclasses in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. We thank them very deeply from the bottoms of our hearts. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube, please check us out on Patreon by following the links in the description below.
And don't forget to check out our live play Shadows of Drakkenheim, which airs Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we have plenty more videos where we rank the subclasses in D&D 5e right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time
In the dungeon.